going to be moving on to the next speaker because of time. So I was wondering if Dr. Alogna is here. Just a brief introduction. So Dr. Alogna is a senior research fellow in environmental and climate change law at the British Institute of International and Cooperative Law, where he leads the program in his field. He's an associate member of the Sorbonne Research Institute and a member of the IUCN World Commission on Environmental Law. Dr. Alogna has played key roles in projects like Global Pact for the Environment and the Ally Project on Ecocide. He's a licensed attorney in Milan. He lectures on various legal topics, including climate change law and environmental liability at several universities. So he has co-edited notable works on climate litigation and holds a PhD in comparative and international environmental law. So Dr. Alogna, you're going to be talking to us today on a global toolbox to navigate corporate climate litigation. So
good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for your invitation. Thank you for this generous presentation, and thank you for the other speakers for their insightful presentation. So today I'm going to talk about a project that we have developed in the last 2 years at BICOL, at the British Institute of International Comparative Law, and is a project dealing with corporate climate litigation, so climate litigation involving businesses. And this is really a collaborative work we have done with 17 countries in all continents. Very interestingly, we also involved scientists, judges, practitioners, but let's say that our rapporteurs were mainly academics because we wanted to keep, let's say, a certain distance with this topic that, as you can imagine, is quite delicate. So I'm going to start by illustrating a little bit the concept of corporate climate litigation, why we use that, then just a few words on the scientific basis for corporate climate litigation, why this is really important in this moment, as also a phenomenon that is evolving, that is expanding a little bit everywhere in the world. And then I'm going to talk finally about the project, this global toolbox, and hopefully there is also space for some question. I'm really happy then to discuss any of this with you. So let's start by the, let's say, the terminology that we are using, corporate climate litigation. This is like a terminology that we chose also before, because of what I said before, because this issue, this kind of litigation is also quite delicate. We are dealing with some actors that are among the most important in our society, in our economies, because as you can imagine, the carbon majors, as we call them today, are really fundamental in our transition to what we call the just transition, but also, of course, they are fundamental for the energy and the ecological transition. So instead of using climate litigation against companies, this is was a little bit more problematic. We use corporate climate litigation and also use this terminology. This is a little caveat because there have been also some phenomenon in these kind of cases that we are studying around the world. So the corporation in the last year have also used the courts to counter climate campaigns from NGOs, individuals, and communities through what we call the SLAP lawsuits. So these strategic lawsuits against public participation, which are strategic cases that in a way aim at silencing critics. So as I said, the delicacy of this kind of topic. For example, 2 years ago already, last year actually, Total filed a defamation suit against Greenpeace France, and that was over-reporting, questioning its emission data. So Total suit demanded basically the deletion of this report. Was Total Energy something like the numbers don't add up, so was quite critical of what Total published, and Total also asked for fines, and that for NGO anyway might be also quite important in terms of weight. And so at the end, good news, I could say this case was dismissed last April 2024. But this also highlights a little bit the dual role of corporation in both driving and also resisting climate accountability efforts. In Italy, we have also a case that is quite similar, brought by Eni against, for example, Greenpeace Italy, that, as you probably know, is bringing a case before Italian courts for their contribution to climate change. So the scientific data, the scientific basis for corporate climate litigation, I'm not going to speak too much about that, also because that's why I put some links. Then I will share the slide, or if you want, you can have them, and so you can go and click directly on those reports. But this, in a way, is fundamental to understand why we should talk about this part of the climate governance, which is climate litigation, and particularly litigation against businesses. So in a way, this highlights even more precisely the role of these large greenhouse gas emitters, as I say, these carbon majors in climate change. So the first reference that I put here is Richard Eady's report, and I mean, he's the director of the Climate Accountability Institute. And this group of scientists in 2014, in their first report, then was updated. Now there have been also new ones. They were the first to attributed at that time 63% of the historical CO2 and methane emission to just 90 companies. Now, with the new report, we arrived to 70% to 100 companies. But you understand that if we are talking about fossil fuel cement producers at the basis of 70% of global greenhouse gases, we realize also how much is the power, of this kind of litigation. If we can manage to involve them, to convince them to foster their action, toward this just transition, or anyway, the energy transition that we need. And this in a way is a very important piece of science, attribution science. As you know, this is really the science that links directly the emission from these companies to the rising levels, the rising temperature, or I was saying the sea level rise, or all the catastrophic or extreme effect of climate change. And this is quite interesting because in the last years, we are lucky enough to witness really a big evolution in this field, in attribution science. You can see that, you can read that just by reading the latest assessment reports. As you know, the IPCC last report was 2021-2022, and there we already have an idea of this. And in a way, it's interesting also that IPCC in this last report highlight how climate litigation is going to be really a critical component of our climate governance, global climate governance. So in a way, it's pushing scientifically, and also is reassuring that we really need to go also that way to complement, of course, the first and most important part of our climate governance is certainly the negotiation at the international level, and then the efforts by the different countries. So there is also another paper that I put there. So the third point is that this attribution science is something that is being really an achievement that is a collaboration between very different centers. Oxford University has published very interesting work on attribution science, also putting together scientists and lawyers. Columbia University, as you know, the Sabin Center is one of the leading centers on climate change law. They're also working a lot on that. They publish very interesting research. UCS is the Union of Concerned Scientists, that is an American organization that is contributing, is pushing, or anyway is called as witness, expert witness in many cases in the US. And you probably know the US in terms of legal system is quite important because it's 3/4 of cases on climate litigation. Then just going quite rapidly, Grass and Heady, this is another publication that came out last summer. The one is an Italian professor, the other is Rick, that is part of our core group, Rikidi, and they just estimate in this article, in this research, this is an article, this is a research that they did last year, that the fossil fuel companies that they identify, they owe something like $209 billion annually in climate reparation to the vulnerable communities. So you can understand when we are talking at the Paris Agreement, you know, in the UNFCCC, let's say COP meetings about the 100 billions, and then we realize that you know, potentially we could ask for more than double of that to the companies. I mean, we understand also the scale of what we are talking about. Then the last one is a book by Oreskes and Naomi Oreskes, also part of our group as a core group member. And with a colleague of hers, she drew the parallels between the fossil fuel energies information tactics on climate change and the tobacco industry's effort to delay regulation. And so in a way, this is really a parallel in which we see how they try this kind of industry to prioritize corporate interest over public welfare. So this is something that is being highlighted on the tobacco, and now is working also very well on climate change. So I don't know how many minutes do I have, so I try to go a little bit faster.
So you have like 5 minutes more, yeah.
Okay, perfect, thank you. So this is just a little overview where I put increasing in number of corporate climate litigation cases. We should see that now we have more than 200 cases around the world globally, and this is without counting the cases in the US. As I said, there are 3/4 of cases around the world. So in the US is the place where we found, let's say, the early cases of this kind. We have this village of Kiradina versus ExxonMobil, didn't work for procedural reason. And also we have early cases that often faced legal barriers, but on a way, these are the cases that paved the way for the very diverse claim that we are witnessing now. So now climate litigation involving corporations includes duties for directors, corporate directors, disclosure obligation, and we see that we are starting to target companies across many sectors. And in a way, there are three major cases that are, let's say, illustrate better than others the landscape. The first one we already mentioned is a very famous case, the Video Defensive versus Shell, which, by the way, in exactly 11 days should be decided before the Court of Appeal in the Netherlands, but it was already a successful case in the first instance. Shell was ordered to cut their emission by 45% by 2030. And so they have to align with Paris Agreement. The second one, is really about mitigation. The second one is about a Peruvian farmer that seeks adaptation costs due to climate change damage attributed to a company in Germany, RWE. So one of the biggest energy company, and there is on the other side this case of transnational litigation from Peru to Germany. The third one is also to have different kind of actors. So Medio Defense is an NGO, Luya is an individual, and the third one is a state. So California last year in September launched these lawsuits against a group of fossil fuel companies, accusing them of misrepresenting climate risk and demanding abatement funds. There is a lot of causes of action. I would take probably 10 minutes just to tell you all the different claims. But in a way, this is interesting because it shows that there are very novel claims and creative interpretation of existing laws that are trying to bridge this gap, that I said, this regulatory gap, to push, in a way, climate litigation into new territory. And yeah, I just put one article of mine that is open access. So if you want to see, there is a little bit an overview. But this also gives the way to the project that we are developing at Beacon. You can scan the QR code embedded in the slide to access the project webpage. And this is a project I said we started 2 years ago. We try to study the possible avenues. We try to understand the hurdles that we find in different legal systems, and say 70 different legal systems in all continents. And also, I think it's really interesting, we try to discuss with the expert academics practitioners, judges, scientists about the prospect for this kind of litigation, country by country, but also trying to see what are the lessons learned that we find around the world. So this is something that we launched in March this year, and gave, let's say, birth to this collaborative, evolutive, open access platform that we call the Global Toolbox on corporate climate litigation. As you can imagine, our goals are pretty clear now. I think that they stated that map corporate climate litigation, catalog the pivotal cases. Of course, we have to start from somewhere, but also trying to learn lessons from other fields, foster strategic perspective, and of course, interdisciplinary. This is very important thinking, and trying to help in a way, at least with this knowledge in litigation planning, and motivate, as I said at the beginning, corporate change through raise awareness of the corporate risk by societies, by corporate actors. So we have a core group of these distinguished people, some of the most distinguished people in this area. We have 7 international rapporteurs, and the international expert group now has more than 200 people. So now I show you the platform where you find the toolbox. Is in 3 parts. The first is resources, which is quite interesting because we are developing this as a sort of repository, of all the literature and the references in the field. It's quite interesting, but it's still a work in progress. The second one is something that we are developing a high-powered database, so it's going to be launched next year, and you can go like ChatGPT and ask for real answer, real suggestion on how to bring this case or how to defend in this case in the different countries. And then we have the toolbox. So this is the toolbox platform. So here you will see there are the 17 national reports, so substantial work by our national groups of experts. Then we had the 17 national conferences and 5 regional summits when we put together all the experts from different countries in the same continent. And it was really, we have the recording, we have a lot of material. So please go there and check this. So you see, this is the webpage of the national reports. And this is a little bit the idea of the main thing, the global toolbox. So you see, we have all these different causes of action. So the fundamentals that we are going to use for this kind of cases, whether they are human rights or tort law or corporate law, contractual obligation, for example. And then, of course, we explore all the procedural issues, also related, as I said, to causation in the sources of evidence. And we try to understand what are the possible remedies that the judges are going to grant in this kind of cases. And yeah, this is a little bit what we have done so far in terms of the different events. I just have to mention that the Brazilian event is going to be at the end of this month, on the 29th. It will be online, so everybody can join. It's for free. And the US one, we organized that, and also the Dutch one in February. So will be the US and America's one will be in Washington, DC. And we will have experts from all the different countries that participate in the project in America. And yeah, so this is really also a call for you. If you want to join us, our project, if you are an expert in this area, or if you want just to be, informed, you have my email, and please visit our website, and I'm open to reply to your questions, of course.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Alogna, for that insightful talk. Well, it's also very interesting to see the other side of, away from science and coming back to environmental law to see how this has been affecting change in climate action. So you actually equally said during your presentation that the number of cases is actually rising. And that brought kind of a question that, so of course, I'm very sure in the next couple of months, it's still going to continue to rise as well, because of the fact that people are now awakening to the fact that these corporate organizations should be held accountable, right, for whatever they are doing to the environment. So, and of course, we also know that these cases, some of them could probably take like years to get judgment on. Some I don't know, probably like some 3, 4, 5 years or thereabout. So my question is, what would you think? Would you think that international collaboration would contribute to holding these companies accountable to what they do to the environment, away from the litigation itself?
Apart from the litigation, you mean?
Yes, it's going to take forever to do, yes.
Absolutely. So first of all, I would say, yes, you are completely right. It depends, of course, on the legal system that we are talking about. For example, some countries are generally considered as more slower, let's say, as slower in terms of procedural, because there are more procedural issues, or anyway, the judiciary is not working that fast because of the number of cases that they are dealing with. But of course, these cases that are growing, they are disseminating. There is a ripple effect by, for example, media defenses. So we see that coming in Italy, coming in the other part of the world, in Latin America. So this is something that in a way is quite encouraging. But as you said, probably international cooperation should be the real and the first response to this kind of issues. So let's say that when we talk about international law, of course, we are talking about a law that is among states. So generally, the companies are not really concerned, not directly, I mean, indirectly with the adoption of legislations. But on the other side, in this moment, we have seen in the last 20, 30 years, a movement that is creating a more precise obligation for companies. And this is the fruit of young GPs. I'm sure that you already discussed that, OECD guidelines. And in a way, we are also trying to make sure that, the fact of having a company that is in a particular country, but, for example, create externalities on the other side of the world, is not going to be a problem anymore. At least we are trying to arrive to this point. So, for example, we have, as you know, the new Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. This is quite an interesting instrument that is going to go in that sense, to make sure that corporations are accountable for their impact, for their activities, for anyway, we are dealing with a complex field. When we're talking about climate change, we cannot avoid talking about issues related to human rights. We cannot consider that most of these people that are affected are coming from global south countries, or are indigenous people, or are some vulnerable part of our societies, like women, that are more affected by climate change. So in a way, this complex reality is starting to become more enshrined, this kind of tools, also at the legislative level. And that, for me, is the best option. The second best option, of course, is climate litigation. But climate litigation should not be seen as we need to recover, as I said before, these 209 billion possible dollars by the companies. We don't want to put them out of business. They should be a warning. They should be like, look, there is a litigation risk. You are going to pay much more if you are not doing a real and effective transition. And so this, I think, has always been a little bit the goal of environmental law since I would say, 80s, because before it was more command and control kind of legislation. Now, a little bit this law and economics, let's say, streams in the US, and then was a little bit disseminated around the world, and make us understand that we need to discuss with the companies. We need to create also legislative tools that are more market-based or take into consideration their interests, of course. And so I think this is really what in this moment we are trying to do. But we have to consider also something. The Paris Agreement is already something that is considering this kind of approach. And, NDCs are national determined contributions. So we are not asking the countries to do something that is being decided at the international level. The country decides by itself. So we need something more to make sure that they are more ambitious. And climate litigation can go in that side, can foster a little bit more ambition from legislators, from governments. We don't have much time. And so basically, this is really what we can use to make sure that we arrive to this just transition and to keep our Paris Agreement goals on track.
Well, thank you very much for that extensive response to that question. So, well, for now, that is probably the only question I'm going to be taking because of our time.
Okay.
So, thank you very much, very much. Thank you very much for coming.